I'm Lexy. I do the marketing here. So I only joined in sort of July time, so I haven't been here that long still. But yeah, so I do the marketing for Zircotec.
Okay. And you, Joe, what's your...
Yeah, Joe Harwood, Motorsport Sales Manager. So I joined Zircotec in January 2019. Prior to that, I spent 4 years working with another company, mainly focusing on Formula One high temperature insulation solutions, but we also did some diesel to meet emissions, and the company was an aerospace-based company, so there was some aerospace in there as well that I had involvement in. Prior to that, I spent a long time selling protective coating equipment and shot blasting equipment, so which is part of our process. So I have a understanding of knowledge of our process. And then going way back to when I was just a young lad, I was a car mechanic.
Okay. So motorsport's been your thing for a long time, and motoring, I suppose.
Yes. I was. They gave me a bottle of petrol to suck on, not a bottle of milk, I think.
Yeah, same as my little boy at the moment. His granddad's a Ferrari mechanic. Well, I say Ferrari. He's a Ferrari stroke Jaguar expert. He's retired now, but he knocks about with his granddad a bit, and he's been knocking about with me in my workshop downstairs. So he's starting to pick up a lot of mechanical skills, even though he's 3.5, he's just there, but he's 3.5 now, and he's constantly got a drill in his hand. So he'll continue. So what products do you offer do you offer stuff to everybody, or is it just the motorsport industry and OEMs?
Yeah, no, and anybody and everybody. So we're a thermal solutions provider. Obviously, my side of it's involved in motorsport or automotive, but there are industrial applications in oil and gas, and there are applications in aerospace, and really, well, funny enough, we were talking about hair straighteners with somebody the other day. So anywhere where you've got a heat issue, we've most likely got a solution for it.
Okay. So how long's the company been going for, and where do you think you're going in terms of dropping the temperatures for combustion engines and so on?
Well, the company's been around for many years. It started as part of the nuclear industry. And one of the stories Terry, our MD, will tell you is that they started coating exhaust with the Zircotec coating, and it became more and more popular in motorsport and motoring, till eventually, and they were still under the roof of the nuclear authority at that time. And until one day somebody walked in and went, "When are you getting all these bloody exhausts out of here?" And then Zircotec became its own company. But part of the drive was with the Subaru well, it wasn't even WRC in those days, the Subaru Rally team, basically, and ProDrive.
Paul Pitford, 48 Charles Road.
And exhausts and such like. So that's the real first big scale involvement in motorsport. And then sort of about, I think it was 2002 or 2003, Zircotec became its standalone company, and then just grew from there, really. Okay.
So when we talk about is it just a spray application, or are we talking? Do you do like the old school wraps? Do you do those like on exhaust pipes?
Oh, don't swear. You're not allowed to talk about wraps. Do you want to put some fire risk on your car? So that's what we call wraps. So we do. Can I share a presentation on this? Will it let me? No, it's not giving me an option. Anyway, so in basic level, yes, what Zircotec started out with is a thermal barrier coating, which is about 500 microns thick. It's made up of ceramic, and it's applied, it's molten ceramic in a plasma form that is applied at high speed and builds up on platelets on the substrate or the exhaust, as it may be.
Yeah.
And what that does is it gives a very tortuous path for the heat to try and escape through, but it increases the thermal capacity and effectively adds an insulation to an exhaust wall over a very thin, 500 microns basically, so a tiny thickness. And there is nothing else that would parallel that in terms of that space envelope for the type of temperature reduction you get. So that's sort of stage one, and we can apply that coating to exhausts, turbos, or more interestingly, I don't know if interestingly is the right word, more prevalent in F1 at the moment, onto carbon fiber. So lots of brake ducts and areas, brakes around areas, etc., where you want carbon fiber to run in areas that are seeing 1,000 degrees C. If we coat the carbon fiber, it can do that. So then your next sort of step in terms of, okay, we've got a heat problem and we want to reduce the heat, is you go to an insulated core with a metallic skin over the top of it. And we can offer that with various different cores. Typically, you're on to sort of 5 millimeter space envelope of insulation, which would then sort of almost half the temperature of an exhaust pipe, if not a bit more. And then you can go up and up in terms of thickness of insulation cores to get what you need it to do, bearing in mind all the time space envelope, because typically, again, motorsport, everybody's got 4 millimeters of space and they want to lose 500 degrees C in it, so you end up with a bit, you can put 20 millimeters of insulation on and everybody's happy, but that doesn't fit on the car. So there's always a trade-off between what to do. And more interestingly, for insulation certainly on turbo cars, the more heat you retain in the system, or the better the insulation, the more performance you get from the engine.
Yeah, and they last longer, don't they, as well? Because there's less deterioration of components and parts and bits and pieces.
Well, that's another drive that we're on with. We've engaged with a couple of people who are hopefully going to help us with this story further on as we move forwards. But it's quite commonly overlooked outside of F1, really. Some serious motorsport, touring cars and stuff realise it. But as soon as you get to clubman level, people don't think about thermal management on the car. So they're actually, they're heating their inlet charge, they're cooking the fluids, their brake fluid, the power steering fluid, and it's because they just completely are. And one thing we always say is that nobody ever wants any insulation until they need it. Because you don't think, oh, I want it, and then somebody will go, oh, hang on, the car's on fire, or that's burning, and then they all of a sudden want insulation. But I think what we're trying to do with some of the people we're working with is bring it more into the forefront that, it's not only reducing the heat that's coming off the exhaust, but all the other benefits you get within the engine bay, and the heat retention you get. So it is actually, it's a worthwhile step to put in place to improve the performance of any car, basically.
Yeah. So you're dealing with, do you deal with classic cars as well, or is it just
new stuff? Classic cars, and again, certainly the coating, because obviously the regulations for classic cars and certainly in racing only allows period modifications. And the ceramic coating, not by us, needless to say, has been around since, I think there's a picture of a Ferrari F1 car in about 1969. It's quite a famous shot probably. It's got, if you look on the internet, you'll see an old Ferrari with bright white exhausts. And that was the first applications I know of a ceramic coating on an exhaust system. So it was quite heavily used in Formula One in the sort of 70s. And then they sort of, I suppose through the 80s. But our involvement with F1 probably began more mid-90s, and that's just purely down to the age of the company rather than the solution.
Yeah. So does it add weight? Is it quite heavy, this stuff, or?
Yeah, you do add weight, but as you will do with any insulation, funnily enough, yeah, Ferrari, the first year everybody went turboed again in 2014, 13, I can't remember now.
Yeah.
Ferrari said, we don't want any insulation anywhere on the car. And then they sharp realised actually they do need it on the car because everybody else was going quicker than them. So it's funny, the weight to power offset is you know, it's always a gamble. It's always a, you know, thing that you've got to consider. And you're right, it does add weight, but hopefully the benefits that you get from it certainly, you know, would outweigh the weight penalty that you're adding to it, basically.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking grams here. We're not talking kilograms. We're talking we'll be adding grams to the car. So,
Okay.
you know, you can always go on a diet.
Yeah. And then I've been
I didn't
saying
mean you personally, but yeah, it's funny.
no, I've been saying that for years for myself.
It's just funny when you hear people talking about, oh, I've pulled all the interior out my car and I've pulled all the sound deadening off and I've got 10 kilograms out the car. And then you think, actually, if you ate less pies and did a bit of running, you get 20 kilograms out the car, and that's you, not the, you know, and you still have a quiet car.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so so you mentioned you do other industries as well. So what kind of industries are you working in at the moment? Like, what is there any top brands that you can reveal to me? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit scarce on the detail on it, but I'm aware that there's so much more you can do with our ceramic coatings in terms of protecting corrosion protection, temperature reduction. But we can also apply it and machine it back, so it can be made into standalone components as well, basically. But yeah, I don't have any involvement in that side. We relieve a lot of that to Terry, our MD, who's had many years of experience with it, basically.
Yeah. And is it sprayed on, or is it painted on? How is it done?
Nope. Yeah, so it's a plasma applied. So you've got an electronic arc, which I believe fires it at something ridiculous like the speed of sound at 2,000 degrees C. And it's these little particles we melt and fire out the gun at high speed in an electronic arc. It looks a bit like a big welder gone wrong when you see it in use. So it's quite an impressive set of fireworks to see them using it, basically. But what it's doing is melting and, for want of a better word, splatting the whatever we're melting the materials onto the substrate to build this sort of torturous, this plated heat path, basically.
Yeah, and so say I wanted an exhaust pipe, just for example, done. Would I send you the exhaust or the car, or would you guys come to me? How does it work?
Yeah, we can't come to you because the equipment's stationary and there's about £4 million worth of equipment there. So it doesn't, although we have developed what we call a pod system where it can be movable for OEM projects. But it's, you know, there's a lot of other associated kit that goes with the plasma kit, basically, and it requires an awful lot of power. You know, you can't just plug into a 13 amp socket on the wall. But yeah, you would send the exhaust to us, and we would, so as long as it's free from oil, we clean it, we grit blast it as part of the process. So it's always worth understanding with older exhausts, again, you're actually getting effectively a free grit blast before we coat it. And then we apply the coating, and then if you want, you can have a colour applied to it as well. And then within a couple of weeks, you've got a nice clean exhaust back, and you've got a much cooler engine bay as well.
So you do any colour as well? You can do any colour?
Yeah, we do a big range of colours: blacks, metallic blacks, silver, blue, green, gold. Yeah, there's a huge range of colours that we can offer as well. So what we call motorsport white is predominantly what I deal with in the motorsport world, and that functionally does everything you need it to do. If you want a different aesthetic, different appearance, we add a colour coat over the top of that then, basically, which you know, the things like the metallic blacks look great, very attractive finish. And again, there'll be some pictures on the Facebook pages, I believe, of different colours.
I didn't realise you had a Facebook page.
Yes, yeah, we have Facebook and Instagram as well, and that's a lot of those photos are of kind of the different performance colours that we do. Because you know, a lot of people like to kind of beautify their engine bays. Some of them go for the more classic colours, some of them go for kind of the brighter, more eye-catching colours. So there is a big range.
Yeah. No, I remember seeing you guys. I think you were at a classic car show or something, or was it Birmingham NEC? It could have been Birmingham a few years back. You had a little stand there, and I remember seeing the engine bay that you were, and I thought, "Oh, that looks beautiful." That was the first thing that made me think, "That's amazing. That looks amazing." And then I realised that it was actually there was an engineering purpose behind the exhaust, the way it looked, not just the way it looks. It's got a functionality to it. It's doing something special to the car to make it perform better. Which then I thought, well, in the future, I'll definitely have to come and see you guys, because I haven't got any classic cars at the moment, but I've sold them all.
Buy some more. Buy some more.
Yeah, I know.
You don't have too many cars.
I cleared the workshop downstairs, and then people filled it up with furniture. They've moved house.
Oh, dear.
Could you hold this for me? Could you hold this for me? And I've got a 4-car garage underneath the house. I want to fill with classic cars and bikes. So
I say I could help you with that if you want. I'm always looking for car storage.
oh yeah. Well, my last car, which was a Porsche 924 Le Mans edition, I sold that in October, just gone. Just to clear the garage. I want to buy other stuff, so, but I haven't been able to. I've started this podcast because of my love for cars and classic cars, and then so that's my focus at the moment. And then, sorry, someone's just tried to walk through the door. Probably my little boy back from nursery. Say hello. So yeah, I mean, so where was I going? Yeah, so it'd be nice to come and see you once this lockdown's over. I suppose we'll have to. I mean, you're in Oxford, did you say?
Yeah, so we're in Abingdon in Oxfordshire. So yeah, near Oxford.
Okay.
Where are you based?
Well, I live in Kent. I work in Stevenage. So I'm all over the place. But yeah, I can take half day off and come down and meet you guys. And because ideally, what I want to do this podcast face to face, with the lighting and everything, and maybe some products behind us. Or on your page, Joe, you've got a nice backing there. I kind of started my backing, but then things didn't work out, so I've just done a normal studio here. So, but yeah, I mean, so let's get back to the what was I saying about the motorsport industry. You're working with them quite closely. Do they come to you, or do you actually go to them and say, we've got this product that you might like? How does it work? Because motorsport is very hard to get into.
It's a bit of both. I mean, I've been quite lucky from my previous role that obviously I've got contacts in places, and Zircotec have historically had those contacts as well.
Yeah.
So Zircotec have been a band-aid solution at times when, you know, the heat problems start to be seen. Where do you go? Bring Zircotec quick and see what they can do. So I suppose we've grown on that a bit with the history of Zircotec and my additional knowledge, and basically trying to move the company forwards and provide more into the world of you know, F1, motorsport, etc. But there's still plenty of people out there who we need to talk to, basically. And again, they might be limping along with you know, thermal issues that they don't realise there's an easy solution for.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a similar situation with spacecraft. So Mars rover, for example, is one of my projects that I previously delivered to the European Space Agency. So just a background, I'm a spacecraft designer. I work for Airbus Space and Defence, I did thermal engineering at university, so I know a little bit about thermodynamics and getting heat away or heat to an area that they need to be heated. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the engineers in our place, we've got a whole thermal department that deal with, we need to cool this area, mainly because of electronics, but sometimes it's direct sunlight. So if you're in space, for example, and you've got one side facing the sun and the other side's facing Earth, you've got to heat the side that's facing Earth, and you've got to cool the side that's facing the sun. And we use a whole array of different techniques. Nothing that you guys do. We don't use any of that stuff. We use more kind of, it's like a sheet of gold.
So I say polyimide is what you'll use, isn't it? From the gold coated polyimide. Yeah, it's lovely stuff. You've got to keep it in a fridge, and it costs a fortune, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we use different layers of different materials as well to get the effects that we need. Okay. But I'm not an expert on thermodynamics, so I can't really go into that. But what I will say is that whatever they're doing there is phenomenal. I mean, they are among the best thermal engineers that in the world. But
it's easy in space because it's a vacuum, and a vacuum is actually a really effective insulator. So back down here on Earth, it's actually harder because the whatever air you've got between the components is transferring heat rather than the vacuum, which isn't.
Yeah. So when we talk about transferring heat and all that on your components, so you deal with exhaust pipes, do you deal with head gaskets, things like that? Do you deal with heads, and do you get inside the engine, or is it just the external?
No. Well, we can coat valves and pistons to help with heat transfer on those, basically, and help fuel swirl as well. Yeah. But typically, where we're at is really around the exhaust and around the turbo, and on those components and around those components where we're seeing heat issues onto bodywork, other components, basically. And then the same again on brakes. So we've got, two areas, or three main areas: exhaust, turbo, brakes, all generating a lot of heat. And of course, everybody wants that heat not going anywhere else but those components. So the challenge always tends to be around how we contain the heat onto those, basically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when you talk about brakes, for example, I think it's some Formula One cars, they need their brakes to be heated up a little bit before they kind of start binding. So how do you get
most competition cars do that. It's because obviously the brake pad material, on really any competition car, will be designed to run at a different range from your road car brakes. So a road car brake pad will run from 0 degrees C up to, 300 degrees C, maybe a bit more. Once it gets to 500, you put your foot on the brake and you need a new pair of pants because it doesn't stop. Yeah. Whereas competition brakes will go from that 300 up to 800.
Yeah.
Or 800 up to 1,000. So opposite, that they don't work at all when they're cold, or they grab and you skid everywhere. But once they're up to temperature, they actually work nicely, and you get a progressive feel out of the brake pedal, effectively. So, but you're right. Yeah, you've got to, contain a certain amount of heat within the brakes for them to heat up. But and typically the brake surrounds, what they're doing is doing that, but also diverting and driving air over the surfaces to cool them once they're in use. And really, the preference for teams and companies is to use a composite solution in that area. Obviously, it's very strong, it's very cheap, it's very light. So, but the issue is when you've then got a brake disc running at 800 degrees C, and your composite only wants to see 300 degrees C, you're going to start. You end up with a lot of flappy fibers unless you do something about it, basically. And that's when we add our barrier coating, our coating on that to make it work, basically.
Okay. So with something like a turbo housing, for example, obviously the turbo housing's got tolerances, you know, the mechanical tolerances. When you add your coating, that takes it out a little bit, or how does it work?
Do you mean on the outer surface, or you're thinking of the inner surface as well?
Well, the outer surface, not so much, because obviously you're mounting the turbo to something, and it doesn't matter too much about tolerances. More so the internal stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
or,
so
or
you can add different types of coating, which the turbo impeller will cut back in use.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with a very close fit between the impeller and the body. Again, that's more of a specialist application. Typically, what we're doing with turbos is the outer case of it to stop the to maintain the heat within it. But you're right, yeah, we can look at, and I have looked at quite recently on a series project, coating internals and how the materials we need the impeller blade to be, and the materials we'd use on the applied coating, basically, to allow it to cut itself back, and then you get a very tight seal and not much bypass.
Mm-hmm. And if say for example I had a Mercedes AMG, yeah, and I come to you guys, is it under warranty? So would you? How does it work? Because some work that you guys would carry out, would that be covered under a Mercedes warranty, for example? Just as an example.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, it's the same as any modification, isn't it? And car dealers are a bugger for warranties anyway, aren't they? So, yeah, I think if you modified your car, that'd upset them. But in terms of, you know, coating and exhaust, you know, you're not going to do it any harm in any way, shape, or form.
You're doing it good, aren't you? Really, you are actually doing a lot of good for the car, I think, in my opinion, anyway. But I'm an engineer, so I understand what you're doing.
But typically, a standard road car has been, you know, well tested enough to not have too many of those heat issues in its standard form. The problem becomes where you then say, okay, I'm going to get one of those nice 3-inch stainless exhausts for it. And then you put that on and you've actually start cooking the bulkhead, or you know, the floor or the rear axle, or et cetera. So, it's then that's where we come in once you've started to modify it, or you're starting to, you know, you take the cat out or something daft like that, and you get much more heat carrying down the exhaust. And again, so it tends to be more, you know, modified cars basically that you'll see it in. I mean, as a standalone, you know, on a standard production car, certainly a turbo, it will give you the benefit of the heat retention in the exhauster.
Yeah. And do you do rally stuff as well? Do you do?
Yeah. Same again. So, you know, it's typically, and again, you know, Subarus, Evos, that type of thing, you use a lot of anti-lag on them to keep the turbo spinning. You can remove some of that anti-lag by retaining the heat, again, a coating or an insulation system. You can take anti-lag down on it, basically. But again, you know, the old Mark II Escort, and there's so many people rallying them, and then you say, what happens with the alternator and the starter motor? And they say, oh, we burn those out regularly. And it's like, well, just code the exhaust then, you know. And everyone goes, oh, that's a good idea. We never thought of that. And so part of what we're trying to do with some of the people we're working with is just make them think, why isn't it part of your automatic thought that, you know, I want suspension and I want this and I want a Zircotec coating on the exhaust, or I need to put a heat shield on here. And, you know, again, it's an overlooked area of performance gain on cars, basically.
Okay. And do you guys design components as well? Say for example, I don't know, I didn't have a heat shield there, so I wanted a heat shield designed and then coated. Do you do that as well? Yeah, we can do that. You do all that sort of stuff?
Either from CAD model, or we can do it from eye if it's a one-off, effectively. So we've got steel fabrication on site, basically, which can achieve that. We do a thing called Zircotec form, which is a coated dimpled sheet, which we sell in a flat sheet form. So you can actually manipulate it yourself, or we can shape that and then coat it and then provide it as a standalone heat shield.
Okay, sounds interesting. Okay. And so, Joe, tell me what you got behind you there. What's all this?
Well, when my little boy was young, he's 8 now. So every Christmas and every birthday, I said I'd get him a signed photograph because I thought, well, they'll all be worth a lot of money in many years' time. So they're all just,
Lost you. Joe?
Bastian Lane, Stig Blomqvist, I think. This is Kvyat and Carlos Sainz.
Yeah.
Batman. Juha Kanganen. There's some Ferrari ones, Alonso, Raikkonen, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So, but then he got into Ninjago and now Fortnite, so he didn't want them on his wall anymore. So they've ended up in my office basically.
Yeah. So you guys, I mean, you're not, Lexy, you're at work, aren't you? Are you working from home, Joe, at the moment?
Yeah, so I live in Durham, bizarrely enough. So, when it was non-COVID, most of my time spent on the road seeing customers, basically. But obviously, all working from home, all being at the office.
Right.
Obviously, of late, it's purely been really just working from home. But seeing as our customers spread across UK and Europe, and I can still quite easily do my job working from home.
Oh, okay. So, is your place shut now? I mean, Lexy's there, Lexy's working, but are you?
No, fully open. It's just me and maybe the one or two others who are able to, work remotely. But my position has always been a remote worker, so to speak, because say really, if I'm not out on the road traveling, which was always the intention of a sales manager, I would be working from home anyway, or in the office on the odd occasion. But I can't get anything done if I go to the office anyway. It's a waste of time.
How big is the company then? Is it a big company?
Yeah, we've got about 50 people in the company as a whole, so not huge.
Yeah. Oh, hang on. I can hear the background noise here.
Oh, it's
Sorry, I'll mute myself again.
That's all right. Yeah. So okay. So look, guys, it's I'm gonna cut the podcast here and say thank you for both of you for coming on. There's a lot more questions I have, but I have to run because I've got another podcast in about 10 minutes. Absolute pleasure, and my listeners will definitely enjoy this one because I do classic cars and supercars, and we talk about how fast this car is and how quick this one is and how much this costs, but we never talk about the engineering side of things really. So it was important that I thought it would be important for you guys to come on and talk about the coatings that you use and why you're using them and where you use them and stuff, and hopefully we'll get more people coming your way to buy more products from you, because I do think you do a great product, or great products at least anyway. And you should come and visit us definitely, and we could show you, and you could see in person what all the solutions are we do, and it'll give you a much better idea of how we can help anybody with thermal issues basically. Yeah, I mean, I was due to visit a few automotive people, people that I've worked with in the past in engineering, because I used to design cars back in the day, and now I'm doing spacecraft. But I phoned them up. I said, "Can I come to the factory and have a look around?" And we do a little YouTube video and stuff, and then I'll add you on the podcast, and we can talk about all the engineering stuff. But because of this lockdown, it's just thrown everything out of balance. It's crazy at the moment. So we're just doing everything via Zoom, which is a little bit more boring, but hopefully it gives people stuff to listen to whilst they're at home and they're stuck at home doing nothing. Okay, so thanks for listening. Thanks for everyone for coming to this podcast, and I appreciate your time. And what we'll do is finish off by just saying to you, where can people find you on Instagram, Facebook, and all of that? What's the link?
So on Facebook we are just Zircotec, and the same with Instagram. Super easy to find, and you'll find everything, all the photos, contact details on there.
Okay, thank you, Lexy, very much. And Joe, appreciate your time. Appreciate your time, Lexy. Have a good day, and we'll catch up, and hopefully we'll meet in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.